a complete life experience as a surfer in LA is incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. You get to hang out and converse with people that are shaping culture or shaped culture before.
Yeah.
And you don't have this anywhere else.
No, you don't.
So we suffer our waves. We have our nooks and crannies, but we have what others don't have, and it's incredible.
That's Takuji Masuda. I'm Jamie Brisick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Surfer's Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, TSJ brings you 128 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more or to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. I first met Takuji in the early 1990s. He was studying international communications at Pepperdine University in Malibu and shredding first point on a longboard. After graduating with a BA in 1993, he founded SuperX Media, a trilingual art house surf skate music magazine. SuperX featured a piece on charismatic surfing hedonist Bunker Spreckels. Takuji felt a kinship and a connection. He'd spent his childhood in Japan and attended boarding school in Canada. He felt like an outsider. For the next 12 years, he poured himself into Bunker 77, his feature-length documentary, which debuted in 2016 at the San Sebastian Film Festival to excellent reviews. Meanwhile, he surfed, married, and started a family. More facts. In 2001, at age 30, Takuji became the Japanese national longboard champion. From 1995 to 2001, he was a guest research fellow at Center for Global Communication of University of Japan. In 2017, he received an MFA in cinematic art from Pepperdine. On a side note, he is a great ambassador for the sport of kings. I won't name names, but many a famous actor, director, musician, etc. were introduced to surfing by Takuji. Takuji is presently working on his first feature film. We spoke in the office of his Malibu home. In the backyard, his kids, Raiji and Hanabi, tore up the halfpipe on skateboards. Takuji, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie.
So tell me how you found your way to surfing.
Well, I am originally from Kamakura, Japan, which is similar to Malibu to Los Angeles. It's a beach town outside of Tokyo. And I grew up there till age 12. But I was sent to a boarding school in British Columbia on Vancouver Island for my middle school and high school, which was sort of like a rugby boot camp in disguise of a boarding school.
Wow.
And I got hurt. I broke my neck at age 16. And so I had to pivot to another sports. But because I surfed growing up, and I was fortunate to have a dear friend named Takayuki Wakita who lived near me, and he was my classmate, and he was already a surfer. So I got to grow up surfing. Whenever I went back to Japan, I used his old board and go surfing. So I started surfing, and then so that was 16, and I decided I was going to pursue my higher education, secondary studies down in Southern California. So I saw an ad of Pasquet's Surf Camp in the Surfer magazine, and I reached out to them, said if I could come for 1 week of summer camp on site, and the following week if they would help me do a campus tour, and they agreed. So I flew down, and I convinced my friend Takayuki Wakita to meet me at LAX, and we did a week of Pasquet's camp. And the following week, Dr. Pasquetz drove us around in his RV. Actually, he didn't drive us around. He just came straight up to Malibu and said, "This is where I'm studying."
Wow. And that was Pepperdine University?
That was Pepperdine University.
And that's when I met you. So what did you study at Pepperdine?
I didn't like being there. Not the school. I wasn't ready to be a student. So I tried to find the quickest way out. And so I did that, but I graduated with less than 3 years. And I got to keep my 4th-year tuition. So with that money, I was originally going to go down to, circle the Latin America in a Land Rover, like being a romantic kid, like do my own version of Che Guevara with surfboard. But, the Fujimori, the prime minister of Peru, was Japanese descent, and Japanese weren't advised to go to Peru at that time. So I had already joined House of Donald Takayama Longboard.
Okay.
And Donald turned me on to Nat Young, and he suggested that I go spend a little time with him in Indonesia. And that's when I traveled down to Indonesia and saw Nat, and Nat invited me to his Oxbow Longboard program. And I got to be on this incredible longboard team with Joel Tudor, Duane Desoto, Bo Young, and myself. I think everybody else became world champion. I think I'm the only pedestrian national champion.
Wow.
But to have Nat Young as a team manager was an incredible opportunity, I was privy to, hanging out with Herbie Fletcher and Donald Takayama and, even Lance Carson in Malibu. But, it was an incredible time. And through longboarding, I think a lot of the brands, like even Quicksilver, was waking up to this longboard renaissance, and they do these Quicksilver Beard Surf Festival, and they invite Barry Kanaipuni, Greg No, Clyde Aikau, all the greats, legends would come, and most of them couldn't surf already, but they just hang out.
Yeah.
And I had a fortune of, of being able to hang out and try to help with anything I could. But, it was incredible to be around these amazing storytellers and people who lived that life. And
yeah, what a fantastic education. And speaking of storytellers, you would soon become a storyteller yourself via Super X Media. When did you start Super X Media?
Well, so that's after I did the Nats Oxbow thing. In 1995, I did 2-3 years of serious campaign trying to keep up with Joel Tudors and Nat Sambo Young and Duane Desoto's, and it was a lovely time, but I just knew that I wasn't designed to be those people. And I got 5th in the French World Contest. The Oxbow had a big contest. I know it was Quicksilver by the Beard Surf Festival. And I absolutely got spanked by Joey Hawkins in quarterfinal, but somehow came 5th.
Okay.
I got prize money, and the French spectator applauded me. Like, they gave me a standing ovation, which I thought was like, okay, I'm quitting now. Like, I don't need to do this anymore. And around 95, that's when the rumors of internet was, coming. In 1993, I had a Apple PowerBook 180C, which was color monitor, and I was sending faxes to Nat Young, to like Oxbow, to like I was really into logging in using my modem.
Yep.
I like the lowest in kbps, but I was into this kind of net, what the technology brings.
Yeah.
Really early on. So when I was graduating from this professional surfing, my family had a friend who's a communication doctor, PhD, who started this thing called Center for Global Communication. It's like an MIT's media laboratory, and it was really based on doing researches around networking, internet networking. And so I brought a proposal to this gentleman, and I said I wanted to do mobile publishing, and the topics were sort of like, I was citing the source of like the Beach Culture magazine, and this goes back to Canada. Like I'd buy all these skateboarder magazine, surfer magazine, and once in a while there'd be this Beach Culture, which was a line next to the surfer magazine that had a surfing, art, and I was really intrigued by it. But then I wanted to do something more contemporary around beach culture.
Yeah. Quickly as an
Yeah.
aside, what I found so interesting, and I'm sure you would have
Yeah.
seen the same thing, is the 80s was this sort of boom decade for surfing, or I should say maybe the latter half of the 80s. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And that was the time of really giant logos and day glow colors. The magazines were thick with lots and lots of ads. There were tons. The surf industry was booming. And it kind of, the bubble sort of burst, right? There was that like 91, there was a kind of soft recession in the world. I know, just having been a pro surfer at the time, like a lot of the companies had to strip it back. The magazines shifted. That was when David Carson came in as the graphic designer, art director of Surfer. Beach Culture came out, and it was almost as if surfing was trying to refine. It was kind of like, we've lost our soul. Where is our soul? We have to go find it.
Yeah.
And I think of that period as being, it opened the door for longboarding again, which was a kind of conduit to the past, as we were saying earlier. But yeah, there was definitely something lacking. There was something vulgar about the 80s. It's gone to a point of this like vulgar sort of in your face thing.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like, well, where is the heart and soul? And then there were opportunities to kind of look for its roots, which it seems to me that we were products of being of a certain age at that time.
Yeah, I think there's a little circle jerk of Orange County industry guys. They get so detached from the reality. They don't realize there's a silent mass out there.
Yep.
And when you lose connection to the market, it's dangerous. And I think we've gone through a couple of this rendition of
For sure.
detachment. But anyway, yeah, I could have been wrong about reading beach culture in Canada. It could have been Pepperdine days. I had a couple friends, Jay brother, Joe Scott. He was a longboarder guy who
made some nice surf films. Yeah.
Great surf film with Joel Tudor. And he was tuned in, he was LA kid, that was kind of doing the Pasquets kind of thing, that were kind of had a band like Chili Pepper. It was a great curator of lifestyle. And then having somebody like him, like it gave me more permission to go towards them. Like not a pedestrian civilian style, but you can really pursue surfing and kind of design a lifestyle that reflected who you are.
Yeah.
And I think in LA, you have a lot more of this and less cookie cutter.
Yep.
And I think, and then that's stemming from whether it's the Jimmy Z's thing. There's a lot more art grounded in beach culture in LA. And it's probably the fact that we are in proximity to biggest entertainment and cultural hub of the world.
Yep.
So yeah, like it was different and it was easier for me to stay involved. And I think in LA, like whether it's Mickey Dora writing articles for surfer magazines or, Marty Sugarman with H2O magazine, you yourself went down to Orange County, became chief editor at Surfing Magazine, bringing your narrative and what interested you. That probably was different. Like you were introducing Gomez Bueno, Sando Burke, all these Kevin Ansels and, interesting art into surfing. Whether it was accepted or not, I think LA narrative definitely is a defection, from the mainstream Southern California beach culture.
Yep, I so agree. I mean, I think in having watched it for many years now, coming from LA is great in terms of having an education beyond the beach, but it can also be a real distraction in the high performance realm. And you see the city kind of sucks people up and pulls them inland, or it pulls them away from maybe the singular focus it takes to be a great surfer. Yeah. And of course, the wave quality is not good. But yeah, and I think we were products of that. But how would you describe Super X Media? You probably would have had written a kind of mission statement before.
Yeah, so for me, I wanted to review cultures with a story. For example, we did a literature review of Pacific Ocean Park, culture, which became the Dogtown.
Yep, POP.
And everything as you know. And I think we published it way before Spin Magazine article, the Dogtown and Z-Boys documentary was based on. But we did a massive story. But we did include Wayne Hollowick, the painter, too. We approached Block Cesario Montano as a pure artist. And, so it was artistic review of LA beach culture. And then I enjoy taking, for example, like Chris Pastra's Dune, this professional skateboarder, to like Cuba with Craig Stesek.
Yep, I
We
remember that.
tried to visit places. I took Barry McGee, Craig Stesek to Japan, or, you know, so we had segment like that. And Glennie Friedman, who Skip Ingham introduced me back in the earlier days, he came on board and he made original content because, you know, it took a lot for him to shoot new stuff.
He's the Dogtown photographer.
Yeah, and he did the Fuck You Heroes with all the Def Jam, and you know, he's a disciple of Stesek realm. And so I was able to collaborate with Glenn Friedman, Craig Stesek, who I met through Lance Carson, Glenn through Skip Ingham, and then but at the crux of it, thanks to Joel Tudor, we called Art Brewer because I had a mandate from a Japanese surfing magazine to make articles for them, and I would, you know, organize a photo shoot and write as a journalist. And Joel Tudor was one of my main guys, and we had this series called On the Road. And Joel's always been wanting to get a photo by Art Brewer. So we called him, and he said, yeah, he's interested to shoot Joel Tudor for this magazine project of mine. So we got to hang out with Art Brewer, and he was so generous with his time. We went to lunch after surfing in Cardiff, and then that's when I was hearing his life story. You know, his time with Bunker Spreckels, you know, his time with all these other legends and legendary stories. And so I asked him if he would be open to helping me doing the new rendition of Beach Culture, more global one, but mobile publishing, which was a big thing back in the day. Right. So how did that work out? So like, yeah, Art Brewer called Paul Haven, the art director from Skateboarder magazine. He was doing Snowboarder magazine back around that time. Okay. And we cobbled together a team of, you know, Craig Stesek, Glenn Friedman, Scott Hewlett, who was my dear colleague and a big supporter of mine, at that time was a Longboard magazine chief editor. And he goes on to become the voice of surfing at Surfers Journal. Yes. Or the curators of our culture. Yeah. But, you know, Scott was still a young man. And then lovely editor named Ewan Morrison would come on to help from Longboard magazine. Yep. And Steve Barlotti would contribute. We'd feature Mark Cunningham, and you know, and then Linny Morris, Mark's wife, would help. Michelle Lockwood at that time was, you know, helping us to bring in the female voice, and we'd feature like, you know, Margaret Kilgarran, Barry McGee. You know, all these guys were brought on through our network of friends, and you know, most of the creators, of course, Jamie, you wrote even the preface to my book, you know, and everybody would pile on, and it was surfing related creators. Yep. And then I was publishing the collective, you know, collection of the voice from that universe, you know. Yeah. And but anyway, like I enjoyed it immensely, and it was self-published. We'd find the distributor shops like Spreem in Lafayette would receive like a couple boxes because Glenn Friedman would say like, okay, there's a magazine that's coming up, and the guys would get it to the right hands. We'd have the same in Milan, Tokyo, San Francisco, LA. Yeah. It was like underground. And then how I would compensate these guys was I'd buy them computers and modems and sign them up to like CompuServe or Earthlink, you know, like, I mean, Glenn says like all those guys, I sign up their first email address, and at least, so that was like my kind of research aspect of it. And I think not having a centralized office besides Art Brewers and Paul Havens, when we're publishing, it was kind of kept loose, and and he fit definitely like somebody like Craig Stesek's lifestyle. Yeah. He'd go off and, you know.
No, it was so ahead of its time. I mean, I think of like in COVID, we've learned to work remotely. That's the new thing. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of what you were doing back
96.
Then. Yes. Yeah. And then it was published in multiple languages, as I remember.
In Japanese and French as well as English. And at that time, so like when I was having a little moment in professional longboarding. It sounds like oxymoron, but these people would approach me, like for example, like Casio G-Shock, the head of design would come and sit with me and say, we would like to take you on as a team member or like a rider. And I said, you're gonna sell like 20 watches with me.
Yeah.
And I'd rather help you curate the best guys in the world that would sell more than me. And all of a sudden, like, so you would become our marketing consultant. And I'm like, I guess so.
Yeah.
And I helped them launch Baby G and G-Shock. And we went from 120 million to 840 million. And the guy still credits me. He's giving speeches at Dyson Institute talking about how he met this Japanese surfer kid that was reluctant to join the marketing, but like actually helped put together a campaign. And so Casio owed me enough that their subcontracting agency would just allowing me doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So they, of course, I introduced them to Donovan Frankenreiter, Nathan Fletcher, Joel Tudor, all the way Barry McGee to Thomas Campbell to, Sophia Coppola, We'd make these random team of kind of cool kids,
Yeah.
So when I said I wanted to do a Super X Media, they were like, yeah, let us advertise and help you do it. So I was starting to get paid as a, sort of marketing design consultant.
Yeah, and someone who's very finger on the pulse, I guess.
Yeah, and then instead of being, like a rider per se.
Yeah, it's interesting because this was the period maybe around this time was when like action sports became a term, right?
Yeah. X generation.
Yeah, but what why I loved Super X Media was I'd been, I grew up in LA and I was exposed to a lot of stuff, but I really did put the blinders on for my professional surf career. It was almost detrimental to look around too much. It was kind of just keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
And I did that for a long time. And when I stopped, I remember I started working for magazines. I was living in Sydney. I worked for Tracks and Waves magazines. Then I came here and I worked with Warp magazine, which was a surf, skate, snow magazine. And then I worked at Surfing magazine. But at this time, I was living in Venice Beach. I was so curious about things outside of surfing. And Super X Media, it had a sort of, its roots were in surfing, but then it cross-pollinated with so many different cultures. And it was this great way of, in a kind of entry-level way, it introduced me to so many things outside of surfing, but there was enough surf in there where I didn't feel like I was elsewhere or somewhere where I didn't want to be. There was enough to hold me in, but I was learning a lot from it, I think.
Yeah.
And it must have been incredibly fun to have all these exchanges with interesting people.
Yeah, it was a calling card for me. It definitely kept my life intrigued and interested. And then all these business opportunities would come, but I definitely felt there was, deficiency in culture and art, and that's probably was held universally by a lot of people in LA. And it was our job to voice our concerns. And it still gets into the suburban concerns or even oftentimes rural, which is all cool. But I think cosmopolitan or the metropolitan lens or the voices tend to, like you went to New York and you worked with Big Magazine, it's like it's not like, people tend to graduate from surf world, and surf world, from my view, suffers from it. Whereas there's so many interesting surfers in Los Angeles. From Doug Aiken to Raymond Pettibone to then he goes in different generations of Paris Gallery guys to look at art and entertainment today. We have Anthony Kiedis to, Edward Norton, so many people, so many interesting people surfing, but it's disconnected from the narrative of Orange County. And San Diego.
No, what you say is so interesting because probably similar to you, when I first came to surfing, my parents were frowned upon it. It was sort of you're gonna be unemployed, you're gonna be smoking too much pot. It's not gonna be good for you. I jokingly say that when I told my dad I want to be a pro surfer, it was like saying I want to follow the Grateful Dead around the country. The surf world of today in Los Angeles, I go surfing with some of the most interesting people
Yeah.
in the world, and many of them I met through you.
No, but you and I are in the same water. Like, and my son's talking to guys who found the codex for search engine and started a company called Google. Like, he's getting to surf with like Thomas Edison of our time.
Yeah, yeah,
And and then that alone just brings so much joy to me, because I grew up in the periphery, like in Canada, where is far from things.
yep.
And it's like, I think to be close to the source benefits, and sometimes it kind of like doesn't works to your disadvantage. But I've been around cosmopolitan beach cultures, like in Kamakura. We're a capital of Japan in 12th century, so we have culture, and we're close to one of the biggest cities and one of the biggest street fashion and fashion capital of the world. But we don't have the fluidity. Like, you came and spent years in Japan, and many others, of Tiger Espiritu, like people who are curious. But in LA, the influx of the people, like, I don't know how much percent you're native, but I think most of us that are here are not from here.
Yeah, the majority.
It's like
of the people
New
I know.
York City, but it doesn't have a surf culture. But here, we're hanging out with so many different type of people.
Yeah,
So it's really diverse and interesting.
Yeah.
If you believe in diversity, this is where you find it.
I think so too.
Yeah, if you go to San Sebastian or Southwest France, you find it, but it's very Eurocentric.
Sure.
You don't have this. Yeah, like, so for me, like LAX, it's like this is where the party's at.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you put high performance away on the side a bit, because what you were saying earlier, like, if you put your prowess or accomplishment or accolades as performance that's related to results or coverage, then I don't think you're going to have a complete surfer experience.
Yeah.
But a complete life experience as a surfer in LA is incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. You get to hang out and converse with people that are shaping culture or shaped culture before.
Yeah.
And you don't have this anywhere else.
No, you don't.
So we suffer our waves. We have our nooks and crannies, but we have what others don't have, and it's incredible.
No, I feel that way too, and I think in many ways it is almost a compensation for the poor wave quality and a result of the poor wave quality. Because if the waves were great, if this were the Gold Coast or the North Shore, maybe we wouldn't be as ambitious.
Right. No, absolutely.
People might be chasing waves every day, but because the wave quality is bad, you can't sort of, the ocean does not provide enough sustenance in that regard. So you go and pursue other things, and you have this as a sort of foil and a place to stay sane and retreat from your professional lives.
More physical.
Yeah.
And then we spawn them here, and they show up at North Shore.
Yeah.
They show up down south. But I think it starts here.
Yep.
Yep.
Let's talk about the great photograph that you have of yourself doing something very rare at Pipeline.
So, my primary school classmate is Takayuki Wakita, who was born to surf Pipeline. He dedicated his life for it, and he was like, if you're a goofy foot surfer, you're surfing Pipeline. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to be a goofy footer and his classmate. And I think without his intention, I think I became brainwashed that my life goal should be getting barreled at Pipeline because I'm a goofy footer.
Yeah.
And then however, I was a longboard surfer. Mm-hmm. So I had to figure out how to fit that onto a wave. And nobody else was approaching Pipeline wave with my thesis, of course. And everybody approaches it differently. I think there were many, Hawaiian guys who could ride off the tail.
Yeah.
And they did amazing stuff. And Rusty Carolina would get barreled switchfoot. It was the next dimension of things. And Joel Tudor, when Jay Brother was taking, making his film, like, he had some beautiful moments where he would knee paddle into Pipeline and kind of ride it about 2/3 up on the board.
Yep.
And get beautiful tubes. But for me, like, I had this kind of like vision of trying to get up right to the top tip of the nose and just drive it through a barrel.
Yeah.
It's like one of those surf comics, from Rick Griffin to, Matt Howard.
Yeah.
Like I envision myself going in, but how to get there was the biggest question.
Yeah.
When do you approach the nose? Where do you bank off the face of the wave?
Yeah.
And how much trajectory you want. So like, I mean, there was more failure than success. And even that photo is, if you look at the completion as the success, it's an incomplete. But in my life, it's a complete, because that was as much as, and it wasn't the photo, the personal experience. Like pipeline closes out after, 10, 12 feet. You know? And then one that runs wide onto the sandbar.
Yeah.
That has kind of the section that I was trying to achieve that vibe, But then actually, that's not true. The photo that we're talking about, I'm sort of backdooring the first reef. You can actually, the wave is cascading coming towards backdoor.
Yeah.
So I took off on the deep one.
Okay.
But I figured out the angle when to get to the nose after more than 10 years of trying and failing.
So how'd the wave go? Walk us through that wave.
Well,
It's
I can't. I've had many undocumented nose ride where I packed a barrel, right? It's just that one in particular is documented and it just circulates. It's like in the social media.
Yeah, it gets a lot of hits.
Yeah, and I think like for me, my recollection is I have a big enough board I can roll in from second reef.
Yep.
But making sure all the boys and the gentlemen got their wave.
Yeah.
And I get my, whatever the crumbs on the side. I wait and wait. I don't pull, I get maybe 1 or 2 or 3 waves at the most when it's good like that.
Yep.
And I just make sure I wait my turn.
Yeah.
And when I get my turn, I make sure there's some entertainment value so that maybe there's a, desire for my crew to want to see me do it again or fail miserably again,
Yeah. So you're the only guy out on a longboard. You're sitting further out from everyone.
Yeah.
You get the easy roll in on the sort of second reef.
Yeah. And then I used to go up to the nose right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
And then I hit the chop and sometimes just fall as soon as the wave hit the reef. So I stopped going up to the nose right away. I start up 2/3 of the way up into it, or even like in the middle of the board.
Yeah.
And then I bank it as soon as it hits the first reef and take that last 2 steps.
Uh-huh.
And then that was the way I could hold the low line and hold the nose. And then when you're at that point, you actually have to veer your nose away from the wave, so the tail goes up. And now, like, in my much later years, I've been riding quad longboards, and they work much better than single fin because the tail can go much higher.
Yep.
And you can actually ride over the foam ball. And this was still the days I was riding single fins, and it would slide out. So that was kind of like a lot of adjusting, drifting, and making sure there's enough rail edge and fin in the water and the tail, and your nose edges weren't catching so it wouldn't go up the face.
Yep.
But this one particular wave set up perfectly, and I think I was able to sit through it. And then I think that wave in particular was funny because my friends in Australia called me and said, "Hey, check out this new Surfing Life. It says like 5 ways to get noticed on North Shore."
Okay.
And it shows one picture of like 20 people dropping on Kelly Slater at Wyman, and Kelly's got his hands on both hips. And then like said, get beaten up by a local at Pipeline. And there's some, guy getting pummeled,
Uh-huh.
And it goes on. And like the 5th spread was me and said, take a mal out to Maxing Pipeline and pack a closeout on the nose, break the board into 3 pieces, but come out laughing. And then it shows picture of that wave. I think Sean Davey took. And I'm carrying like this last piece of the longboard, and I'm just laughing. And then it got a lot of like Australian guys thought it was pretty funny. But anyway, like for me, like it was very personal.
Yeah.
And I had an audience but it wasn't really like I in my mind I had retired professional surfing in '95.
Yeah.
You know, when I got fifth at Bearded Surf Festival, that was it.
Yeah.
And I stuck around because I wanted to see it through. The culture was, you know, taking roots in, especially in Japan.
Yep. It was striking, I think, because you don't often see longboarders out at Pipeline, and you rarely see someone on the nose pulling into a giant barrel, which is a perfect seg over to our friend Bunker Spreckels,
Right.
who was one of the first people to go right at Pipeline, which was effectively backdoor.
Yeah.
And he rode a very unique style of surfboard. So can we talk about Bunker and
you
Bunker?
know, I'm the guy that's known as the guy riding a long board. You know, he's the guy that's known as riding a very short board.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying he is at all like me.
Yep.
We share similar backstories, but you know, he was radical in his own ways.
Yep.
And but you know, one of the main reasons I got interested in Bunker Spreckels is that the fact that I told you earlier about Art Brewer, you know, being a collaborator, and Craig Stesek being collaborator, and I think Bunker made deep enough impact in their lives that they kept recalling the events, but it was very inconsistent and foggy at best.
Okay.
I also had friendship with Mike Diffenderfer, who had a very good relationship with Bunker Spreckels. And while he was living, he gave me so many anecdotes. And so I kind of got to be around. And a lot of people be like, oh, man, you should have met Bunker Spreckels, you know. So I published his story in addition to the Surfer's Journal article. Surfer's Journal article came out in like volume 1, third issue, I think had Bunker Spreckels' story. But I wanted to do a deeper dive. So I did 2 articles in Super X Media. But then I wanted to do, you know, I also was graduating the publishing, you know, media element, this online publishing kind of vibe. And I was interested in the more the, you know, 3-dimensional, like sound and pictures to tell a story. And I got to see Dogtown and Z-Boys get made from the story we published back in the day, and all the collaborators from that, you know, Craig Stesek, Nolan Friedman, and, you know, Stacy Peralta making a beautiful documentary about it. And I got to be around the Herbie Fletcher, and I went to the premiere of Sundance. And so I got to see it from outside, how a story could become a documentary.
Yeah.
And actually that became a feature. And I even got to see how the Lords of the Dogtown got made. So after publishing an article, 2 articles of Bunker Spreckels' story, I held that story dear. And I wanted to be the guy that told the story.
What was it that drew you to Bunker as a subject?
I just felt like, you know, displacement. He loses both his father and stepfathers at age 11.
Yeah.
And his mother had a baby. So, you know, probably practically all his parents weren't available. And he went to military school and all that. But the displacement that I experienced by going to boarding school and not having people to turn to, like immediate people.
Yeah.
And the people that were giving you opinion, like they were saying in a language that I couldn't understand. So like, you know, that displacement and having somewhat of an expectation.
Yeah.
I felt like if I stuck with that theme or the construct of it, I thought I was the most appropriate person to tell that story.
Right, because you kind of went against the grain in terms of there was probably a road laid out for you from your father.
Yeah.
That might have been easy to go into, but choosing surfing would buck against that, which is very similar to Bunker, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's a return on investment, right? Like you're investing in your children to go to private school, and you know, and going abroad to a private school isn't cheap, and you know, you want some, you know, you expect some kind of not return in monetary sense, but like somewhat success. Like there's like a goodness there that parents do at their best capacity.
Yeah.
but comes with these expectations. I put so much expectations on my children.
Yeah.
And my thesis is that expectation was the killer. And as the poster reads, like living it up all the way down.
Yeah, for sure. So for the viewer, or for the listener,
Yeah.
Just give a quick synopsis of who Bunker is, or was, I should say.
Yeah. Well, Bunker to me, like, I don't know how best to explain it, but he was the most glamorous, rebellious surfer to come out of LA. He was mentored by Mickey Dora. He mentored Tony Alva. So there's kind of like the three anti-heroes that came from LA beach culture. He plays a very important role of passing that. Mickey Dora, Mickey also had his mentors, but getting that pass. So that as a conduit, he plays a very important role. And he also spun his own style into it. And he had access to resources that he could, live life in hyperspeed, right?
Yeah.
He could get more things done because resources were there.
Yeah.
So he lived a very short life, a tragic overdose death at 27. But I feel like he achieved a lot. And he interacted with a lot of interesting people.
Right. His stepfather was Clark Gable.
He was born into fame and fortune of Clark Gable fame. He was stepson of Clark Gable, and his family, Spreckels, was the sugar fortune.
Yeah.
So so he had both fame and fortune, incredible glamorous look and amazing style, great, not the best surfer, but good enough surfer to hang with the greats. And he was willing to send it, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's the big difference between other rich kids. He was willing to die just like any other person. I think there's some of me that I think I kept my backstory quiet enough that nobody really knew my background. And I blended in better than Bunker Spreckels ever did.
What would be the part of your backstory that you kept secret?
Well, coming from somewhat of a privileged background, But I think at that point, a pipeline or something, like, I like to believe, like, if you're willing to die or risk your life pursuing your dreams, that is not so mercantile. Like, if it's not, you can tell the guys that are coming for the shots or that are trying to please the sponsor or win the contest. But there's a bunch of, I should say, no, like I like to say us, that dedicate their life.
Yeah.
And, whether they're doing rehearsal or they're doing recital, like, we're doing whatever we think. And that's a self-expression, right?
Yeah.
And there's a heavy consequences to that.
Yeah.
And I think everybody respects that,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to defect to it, but there's a story, like, where I felt all of a sudden tide shifted.
Yep.
In 1993, when I was staying at Jerry Lopez's house with Joel Tudor and a couple other longboard friends, it was one stormy, dark, rainy day, second reef pipeline, gnarly, and it started to turn on. Offshore wind came. And at that time, Sean Briley was the main guy.
Oh, yeah.
And
One
Briley,
of the great masochists of pipeline.
Briley and Jason Magallanes, and this another Jason who had a hearing disability named Jason Gantz. But Sean Briley and Jason Magallanes were just calling out people to say, come on, let's paddle out. But no photographer was standby. And this is pre-video days.
Okay.
So nobody was motivated to shoot anything. But, I was at the pipe house, and then, he was calling everybody out. And I said, can I come with you guys? And I said, they're like, yeah, of course you come with us, So I put on a helmet, I found the thickest leash, and I paddled out with them. And somehow I made it out. It was a closing out, but I made it out. And they were doing their thing. And there was this one wave that just popped up. And I was like, I want to go. And they're like, go, go. So I stroked into it. It was another, like that picture. And I just packed this big barrel, sandy one, with my 9-1 Donald Takayama.
Wow.
With my helmet. And I wore my black Lance Carson double striped shorts. And I rode a whale before I paddled out. And I heard the whole beach kind of like go, you know, like, and then, but then because I fell in the barrel, I ended up on the backside of the wave.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm going to go back out.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back out and I corrected, you know, like kind of collected myself and another wave comes and I do the same thing. I packed it and I came in. That time I just sent me to the shore and I roll up on the sand and I go up to the house. But then, of course, that evening to get our food, we go to the supermarket at Foodland, and all of a sudden some guys were like, who weren't pleased of seeing longboarders, like give me kind of like, you're all right vibe.
Right.
And next time I paddle out a pipeline, I felt like I wasn't included, but I wasn't excluded.
Yeah.
There was like, okay, I get you. You know, like you're coming to do this. We thought you were coming to do a photo shoot for Longboard magazine, or you're just here for the world contest.
Yeah.
Which effectively was what everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
Or most of everybody, maybe including myself. But like they knew there was a little bit more calling to pipeline than that for me.
Wow.
And then, you know, Jason and, you know, Sean were so stoked that I was like the rodeo clown show for their high performance thing. And, you know, like, you know, we had a laugh at the Halloween party after. And, you know, but anyway, I felt like that was a moment where I felt like, okay, there's this group of resurgence of longboarders who are kind of annoying, like Wave Storm or Stand Up Paddle, all these trend comes.
Sure.
But like, you seem like, we'll let you be around. Besides our respected mentors from the West Side and everybody else, Lance Holcanos and, you know, like, and then Joel, for being Joel Tudor, of course, you know, he had his place because he was, you know, a pedigree guy. But for nobody, it felt like that session was a breaker for me. Yeah. But then, so I had these kind of memories to go back to. And I know, you know, Bunker was more self-promotional. So he had to really step up the game. And he had a supposedly incredible sense of humor. And he was such a bro to be around. Yeah. But so anyway, I decided I was going to use this as a subject matter for me to enter the storytelling in film.
Yep. And you spent more than a decade working on this film and you immersed yourself deeply. What was that like? I mean, as your friend and having known you for many years and watching the entire process, it seemed like you really got in there.
It was unintentional that took over a decade. You know, I thought I'd be done in a year or 2 or 3. You know, the problem was I didn't know how to do make a documentary film. So I kept hitting my limitations. Yeah. But because of the surfing relationship I had, so many people from the filmmaking, storytelling universe came and just helped me.
No, you had some of the greatest filmmakers.
Yeah, I had, you know, 4 Academy Award winning writers, you know, like Eric Roth, Steve Gagan, Spike Jonze, Armando Bo, you know, wrote Birdman that year. And like, just everybody was so generous with their time. I mean, people went out of their way because I was willing to just not let go. Yeah. You know, I was going to make sure the quality lived up to the standard that Bunker Spreckels would have expected. Yep. So he put an expectation on me.
Yeah. With hindsight, though, do you think it was too many voices in your head, or do you think it was helpful to have all these people?
No, it was great because I push it through the most I can, and I have these people review it, and they chime in. Yeah. And then they're like, what about this? What about that? What I'm not clear about is this. Yeah. Why, you know, so, I mean, thank it was a teamwork.
Yeah.
They say a film is a teamwork.
Yep.
And definitely I was the weakest link.
Yep.
But I was, gonna make sure the ball crossed the end line, So like,
sure.
I think, and then, and then this, I have to be honest because I had the luxury of producing it with my own money.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a deadline.
Yeah.
That slowed things as well as I allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's like you have to sculpt thing, like I think you can't give it up.
Yeah.
You can't give up until the film is done. And when I said the film was done was at all these screenings I'd have, people had no question. And then I take it on the road to a festival.
Yeah.
But at this one particular festival, these senior citizens came. Nat Young actually brought a bunch of, the Silver Fox skier men and women into this Sun Valley Film Festival where I actually had it in competition, which fortunately we won. But this old grandma types were like, so what was the mom thinking about? Like, I wonder what she was going through, Kay Williams, Bunker's mom, when he was going through his very difficult time at the end.
Yep.
And I go, oh, I didn't even service that audience. And so I went back and start building in Kay Williams kind of like in frantic motion of trying to be, the widow of Clark Gable, mother to a baby boy, and trying to salvage this Bunker Spreckels situation while taking care of his sister.
Yep.
And when I put that stuff in and designed the sound, it became so emotional. And I know it hit hard with people, who were mothers,
Yeah, sure.
So that all these things like paying attention to your audience and listening to people who master the craft.
Yeah.
But it's no different than how I did in surfing.
Yep.
Or publishing. I am open to input because I don't come with much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say you learned or took away from your immersion? And I say that not so much as a filmmaker, but just in terms of your sort of life ideology, philosophy, ethos. Where Bunker's a fascinating, multifaceted character. And you got in there, and then you met a lot of people in the periphery, and you spent more than a decade doing so. What did you learn?
Well, besides like our brain is the killer, like expectation that comes from your brain, right? Logics, we have to, it's been written in so many songs, but the freeing ourselves from those things.
Yeah.
And finding that freedom. And when you are expressing freely, whether it's surfing or film, that's, I think, you're getting closer to the greatness.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm there at all, but I felt like I even mentioned Bunker Spreckels, who's not even with us. I had an expectation. I felt an expectation to deliver something he would deem okay. But because I don't have experience to tap into in surfing, I think you and I now get to express. We have the grammar, we have the vocabulary, we have the means, the tools to express ourselves. But in our first project of the film, we don't have the basics. So, like we are more restrained.
Yeah.
And to the guidelines, but I wish, it's a long way to get there. But once I can start expressing my stories without considering too much of these parameters, I think that's where I'd like to get to. And the reason I think I'm in Southern California is because this is the place where people come to be free.
Yeah.
Free from other things.
Yep.
And then there he is, Bunker Spreckels. I'm assuming he's under expectation. And his battle was setting himself free.
Yeah.
Maybe he had to die to be free.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
You know what I mean? So there's so much contradiction. But I think I get a sense why I'm here, why I'm part of this great tribe of writers and storytellers, is that I think we're trying to get to the great place of the freedom of many things.
Yep.
But then I see all the blemishes and reflection of my limitations, right?
Well, Takuji, thank you so much. It's so great to catch up and talk about this stuff.
Of course, my pleasure.
Soundings is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Our theme song is Ohana by Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West. Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal, a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. The Surfer's Journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.